Thank you, Barry, and welcome to everyone to this exciting Marconi Society event. I hope you are as enthusiastic about this event as I am. This truly is an opportunity to hear from titans of industry, the people who have created much of what we live and depend on today for our activities. It's an interesting period that they will be talking about. The early 1970s, 50 years ago, were a period of great invention and the creation of, at a very fundamental level, the elements that we depend on completely. In the case of Federico Faggin, the invention of the microprocessor. In the case of chronologically, Marty Cooper, the first cell phone call with a handheld device, and in the case of Vint Cerf, the essence of the internet itself, TCP/IP. So this will be an amazing session, hearing from these individuals, and I'm very much looking forward to it myself. This is an event that was initially billed as a members-only event, and as we pondered that, we decided that this was too good to hold in the Marconi Society itself, and instead we make this available to a much, much larger audience as an example of the benefits of being a part of the Marconi Society. So hopefully you will take that into account as you move forward. And I know that you didn't come to this event to see me or Barry in front of me. So let's move to those that you really did come to see. And I'd like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies for this event, Yasaman. And she is herself a very accomplished individual. She is a Marconi Society Young Scholar, and currently serves as an assistant professor of electrical and computer engineering at Princeton University, which is, as most of you know, one of the outstanding academic institutions in the United States. So again, to keep things brief, the KISS principle applies, and Yasaman, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Dennison. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm super excited, honored to moderate this panel. Let me go ahead and share a few slides, kick things off. Okay, so today we're gonna have three pioneers, legends, my own role models. And this is my absolute, perfect. Can you see the slides and slide view?
Yes.
Okay. So let me quickly talk about the agenda for today. First, we're going to have three short remarks by our three panelists. Then we will open it up for questions, panel discussions, and also questions from the audience. So please keep your questions coming. Leave them in the chat. We will read it and select which questions we want to ask given our short time. So I thought a lot about how I'm gonna do justice introducing our pioneers in short 3-4 minutes. And instead, I thought you probably know everyone and you Googled and you did your homework. So instead, I'm gonna just share a few pictures with you that I really love. Starting with Federico Faggin. So as you all know, Federico was one of the inventors of MOS silicon gate technology back in 1968. This is the building block of our IC and then the MOS transistors that we see today in every single device, from memory to complex logic circuits and systems. In 1971, 52 years ago, Federico developed the first commercial microprocessors, Intel 4004, and then after 8008, and then 8080. So I remember working with 8080 back at my undergrad, but I don't remember the versions before that. So you can see a picture of this Intel 4004 on the top right of the slide. And this was originally used in a calculating machine that you can see right next to it. It was interesting to learn that this initial CPU was a 4-bit CPU with only 750 kilohertz of clock rate, very different from what we know as a modern CPU processors today. And I think Federico here is holding the layout of the chip. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the layout of the chip that he's holding here. Next panelist is Vint Cerf. So Vint, as you know, he's the pioneer of internet. He, with Bob Kahn, developed the first TCP/IP protocol. They wrote the first document back in 1973 and published it in IEEE Transactions on Communications. I went back and read the document, actually. I was surprised that it was quite interesting and easy to read, and very much similar to what we know of TCP/IP protocol that I teach my students in my introductory class today. The sketch that you're seeing here is recreated from Vint's original sketch that he tried to simplify the problem, simplify this very complex problem by showing 3 packet switch networks connected through multiple gateways and host computers, and trying to come up with rules of how these networks should talk to each other and manage errors that might happen during this connection. I believe the picture on the right bottom is at around the same time, 1972, 1973, when Vint got his PhD at UCLA. Last but definitely not least, we have Martin Cooper on the call. He's the inventor of the first portable cell phone in 1973. I believe Marty has one of the prototypes with him right now. It's very heavy, 2.5 pounds. It's very big, about 10 inches long. He also made the first phone call from a Manhattan sidewalk. And I think this was a great test to see how the signal quality is given a noisy background in Manhattan street. So great to have you all here with me today. This is my absolute pleasure. Without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Federico to start his short remarks.
Well, I'm pleased to be here to talk about a time of history when I was young. In 1968, a computer, the smallest computers were called mini computers, and they had a CPU that was made with of the order of 50 to 100 integrated circuits using bipolar technology. And then they had core memories for the random access memory, and they could hardly fit in a desk. Cost a lot of money. So that technology was the best that could be done in those days. There was a technology that was up and coming, was MOS, but it had many, many problems. And in '68, I was able to create a new technology that changed the way that the MOS devices were built. That brought 5 times the speed of the incumbent technology. Was at that point you could have much lower leakage, which meant that you could make dynamic memories, and you could integrate twice as many transistors in the same area. So that technology was able to solve the problems that solved technology, or with bipolar technology, a computer on a chip. So that technology then ended up in the hands of Intel. And in 1970, I joined Intel, and there I designed the first, so the 4000. at that time, it was still the right way, the right choice. And with microprocessor, the whole way that we design system changed, because now instead of designing a dedicated system, especially for control applications, you couldn't use a computer, of course. The computer was too expensive, was too bulky, cost too much, blah, blah, blah. But if you had a control problem, for example, you would logic of a control problem and make a dedicated system. But now with the microprocessor, you could use software instead of hardware. So all of a sudden, the way to use, to design and use systems was completely changed. It took a few years, of course, but now you don't even think about developing a special hardware to solve the problem. You always solve problems with software. The other thing that happened is that because you could build a computer in a small printed circuit board, an entire computer, and of course with silicon gate technology, we could do dynamic RAM, we could do non-volatile memories that were a no-no with the previous technologies. We could do CCDs. So that technology allowed all the missing pieces to be done in a single chip. And so by 1978, we had a computer on a chip, meaning not only the CPU, the called microprocessor, but also the memory, ROM, RAM, and I/O, programmable I/O. So those were the microcontrollers that changed the way that we do systems today. They ended up in pretty much any application. So this enormous change allowed, for example, the cell phone. The cell phone could not work if you didn't have a computer inside of it. And so, you had to have a computer in all applications, in small boxes, using a little bit of power instead of 1,000 watts or something like that. And so with this technology, the future, the applications that occur were enormous. Also, MOS technology lent itself to be reduced in size, and so it fueled what is called the Moore's law, which is the doubling of the power of a chip every couple of years or so, which has been driving the technology to the point that today advanced microprocessors have 50 billion transistors against the 2350, perhaps if I remember correctly, 52 that the 4004 that were drawn by hand by me had. And so that's a big change. And today, of course, the impact of microprocessors on on all aspects of our life, communications were revolutionized with the microprocessor. The personal computer changed the way that we use computers because they became personal as opposed to being shared devices. And the same happened with the phone. It developed into the intelligent phones that we have today that are really literally changing our life. So today we are at the threshold of a new change in technology, which is the use of artificial intelligence, which requires specialized microprocessors that are many hundreds of times faster, though they are specialized, than the regular computers. We're nearing the end of Moore's law because we have reached 3 nanometers critical dimensions, and 3 nanometers is essentially 30 atoms next to each other. So we're down to almost atomic scale, and therefore we will have to use creativity and new technologies which are coming. But I stop here because there will be many questions later, so I don't want to short the others.
Thanks a lot, and I definitely have a lot of questions, and we'll get back to you, Federico. Vint, please take it away.
So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today, and thanks, Federico, for setting the stage. It's perfect because those low cost and small processors made it possible for us to develop communications technology, which was quite different from what the telephone system grew up on, which was called circuit switching. So in the late 60s, we started to explore an idea which had been around for a while, from the early 60s, and that's packet switching, which makes the communications look like electronic postcards. But it only made sense if the computers that you use to run the packet switching software were cost effective. So the early days of the ARPANET, which began in 1968, the first equipment showing up in 69, were run with mini computers that were taking advantage of what Federico was just describing. We were able to start out with dedicated telephone circuits that connected those special purpose processors together, and which interfaced to the host computers that had the actual applications running on them. The host computers over time have morphed into gigantic data centers that use billions of the kinds of chips that Federico was describing. And the communication systems have advanced from dedicated telephone circuits to mobile packet radio, which we had running in the Bay Area in the 1970s, mid-75, 76 timeframe. Geosynchronous satellites like Intelsat 4A, which we were running in the late 70s to support long-distance communication. Again, all of this is packet switched. In 1973, Bob Metcalf at Xerox Palo Alto Research Center invents the Ethernet idea, which he gets from a radio-based system in Hawaii called AlohaNet, where collisions are resolved by having a random delay, and then you retransmit at random moments to avoid repeated collisions. Ethernet, of course, has morphed into what is now known as Wi-Fi, and simultaneously, with Marty Cooper's work, as you'll hear a bit more about, we had 2G and 3G, 4G, now 5G, and 6G is coming, to say nothing of going from the geosynchronous satellites to MEO, middle level satellites. And now many of you may already be using low Earth orbiting satellites, as you would find in the Starlink system that's run by SpaceX. So over this period of time, several things have happened. One of them is that the speeds and the scale of the system have gone up and often a consequence of the scaling of the computers that Federico was describing. The system has grown. In the case of internet, when it was first started in 1973, it had only 3 networks. It was the ARPANET, the packet radio net, mobile packet radio net, and the packet satellite net. By 1983, when we turned it on, there might have been 400 computers on the system. Today, there are billions of machines on a network which spans the globe and reaches beyond the Earth in the low Earth orbit and larger orbit satellites. And we're not done yet. Because we're now going off planet. There is already work that's been going on since 1998 to expand Internet's operation across the solar system. New protocols have been required, which lets me mention briefly that the layered architecture of the packet switched Internet allowed people to add new protocols at any new layer, add a new layer, as Tim Berners-Lee did when he invented the World Wide Web in 1991. Which was aggrandized by work at the National Center for Supercomputer Applications with the Mosaic browser, which eventually morphed into Netscape Communications in 1994 and triggered the dot boom in 1995. So here we are, it's 2023. Computers are everywhere. Communications is everywhere. We're reliant on software that other people have written. And it is a time of both tremendous capability, to say nothing of artificial intelligence, which is also surrounding us. But it's also a time of great challenge, because a lot of these very powerful technologies allow people to do harmful things in the online environment. So we're now trying to find ways of making the system safer and more secure while preserving all of the benefits that we've watched emerge over the past 50 years of Internet's work. So I'll stop there and hand off to, I assume it's Marty is next.
Yeah, yes, please, Marty, take it away.
Well, it's a glorious day in Del Mar. Erwin, have you looked outside? The sun's shining for the first time in 2 weeks, and I think that's an omen that is going to tell us a lot about what's happening in the next 50 years beyond what we've been talking about up till now. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the history. I want to spend more time talking about what I think is going to happen in the future with this confluence of three technologies that together have only started the revolution that's going to happen in the future. I think we're just learning how to use connectivity, the ability to access all the information of mankind, and to process that information in ways that make it useful for us. I think we're just beginning. But let me talk about the real beginning, and I have to go back more than 50 years. Let me go back 130 years to the laboratory of Heinrich Hertz. He is talking to, this is in a university town in Germany. He has several of his colleagues together. They're looking at this little wooden box with the two little towers on it. And the towers on top of the towers are these silver balls. And he pulls the drapes. He turns the gas light down. You must recognize that the light bulb hadn't been invented yet. And he connects a voltaic pile to this wooden box. A spark leaps between the two silver balls. Across the room, there is a circle of copper wire, and the spark appears, a small spark appears on this other wire. He has now demonstrated that Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism really works. The speed of light, these radio waves have gone across, I think they didn't have radio then, but these waves have gone across the room and caused this spark to occur. And Heinrich says, we have now demonstrated that Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism works. He says, of course, it has no practical use, but it gives us something to work on for the next few years. A couple of years later, Marconi, and I'm talking about our Marconi, decides that maybe there is a practical use. And he does the exact same experiment, except in this case, he has a generator that puts out many kilowatts of electricity. The spark turns out to be a lightning rod. Pow! The antenna he used was between telephone poles in Newfoundland. And if there were any birds sitting on those wires on the telephone poles, they became immediate toast because we were putting kilowatts of energy, literally a lightning bolt. And sure enough, 3,000 miles away in the British Isles, we detect a bleep of sound, and he has created the concept of radio. Of course, Marconi patented this. There is some dispute about whether Tesla did this at the same time. Tesla was in the US, Marconi was in Britain, and Russia, a guy named Popov is celebrated as having invented the radio. In India, it's a guy named Bose. So we really don't know who invented radio. It's not important because this started a revolution where Marconi started a company. Within months, they had saved 1,000 people from dying at the sinking of the Titanic. And the next thing you know, we have radio, we have television. In 1947, Bell Labs announces that they actually two Bell Labs researchers write a paper about how we can multiply the capacity of the radio spectrum by using a distribution of radio signals in a pattern of circles. They didn't know that the radio waves had not been educated yet to stay within these circles, but somehow the system did end up being workable. But they also decided that there was no practical use for this. Now they put it into a filing cabinet. 22 years later, AT&T, remember AT&T, the Bell system, the monopoly that ran all our telephones? They decided that the time was ready to do this. and they announced that they were going to come up with a new system of car telephones, and they had engaged a consulting company, and the consulting company told them, I forgot whether it was Ernst & Young or Deloitte, that the ultimate market for this new device, this car telephone that the Bell system was going to produce, was about 1 million telephones in the whole world, that there would never be more than that. And believe it or not, they were right, because there were, in the history of mobile telephone, the maximum number of car telephones that ever existed was the order of 1 million in the whole world, because my colleagues and I at Motorola decided that the world was ready for personal communications. People didn't want to call a car, they didn't want to call a house, as they had been doing for 100 years. They wanted to call a person, and we created the very first personal portable telephone, an example which I have here, and Yasaman has already described it, so I won't go further into that. Today, there are 8 billion people in the world. There are more than 8 billion cell phones. By the way, I don't know why we call it a cell phone, but it had to be because the Bell system created this thing. This device that we use today is not a phone and has nothing to do with cells, because the cells didn't work anyway. But there are more people using cell phones today. More than half the people in the world are using cell phones. I believe we have just barely learned how to use this device. We're just on the cusp of several real revolutions. And I just want to mention them by name. I can't go into detail. Healthcare. We now have sensors that we can put on a person's body that can measure virtually everything, not only your pulse, your blood pressure, almost everything now. We are learning every day how to put more sensors on. These sensors can communicate with a central computer. You can do a physical examination not every year or every 5 years, but every minute. And there is the potential of sensing a disease before it really becomes a disease. And if we can do that, we can zap these diseases and stop them. There is the potential in the long range to eliminate the whole idea of disease. We're not going to have diseases in the future. The major use of this new device, the ability to access all the information in the world, is to improve productivity, and we are doing that in spades. We are countries in Africa. The United Nations determined that over a period of 20 to 25 years, that 1 billion people moved out of severe poverty. They're still poor, but their productivity brought on by the ability to connect has virtually eliminated severe poverty in Africa. And when you extrapolate that still further, there is the potential to totally eliminate productivity completely. And the most important revolution I think that's going to happen when we put all these things together is in education. The idea of a teacher giving a lecture to a bunch of students, each of whom has access to all the knowledge of the world, more than the teacher knows, is kind of ludicrous. The education system is going to change. It's going to take advantage of the fact that students will have full-time access to the internet, not just when they're in school, but everywhere. And somehow or other, the education system is going to transform into a system where people are learning all the time. Our children, the students, are going to be a lot smarter than we are. And the world that I see in the future is one where poverty it doesn't exist anymore, where people are smart enough not to ever go to war. That's my vision of the future, and I challenge you to challenge my vision. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everyone. So I want to go back almost 50 years ago, maybe the day that Federico, you tested the first 4004 and it worked. When the day that you developed the first TCP/IP protocol and you submitted the paper, or Marty, the day that you developed the first prototype. How much of this transformative technology were you predicting back then? Like, were you predicting that this is a big deal that is going to transform the way that we live? And as the technology evolved, what surprised you the most about your innovation?
Do you have an order that you want to do this in?
No, I think whoever wants to go first.
Well, Marty just jumped in, so go ahead, Marty.
Marty, go ahead.
I only jumped in because I couldn't quite hear what Yasaman was saying. So why don't you start, but repeat Yasaman's challenge to us.
Okay, so basically she's saying when we did some of these took these early steps, did we have any idea what was coming as a result? What have we been surprised about? My surprises in the internet world came in two forms. The first one comes when I realized that this is a potentially commercial system that might reach the general public, because the original work was done for the Defense Department in order to design and build a command and control communication system for the US military and for its allies. And that's what the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency charged Bob Kahn and me to do, and to integrate a number of different kinds of radio-based and wire-based communication technologies into a common and broad global spanning internet. But the fact that it might be of commercial interest doesn't really strike me until 1988, when I walked into the Moscone Center in San Francisco and saw 25,000 people looking at internet-based equipment, software, and applications, and realizing that somebody thinks they're going to make money out of this. So then I was thinking, well, how do we build essentially an economic engine to sustain its use and growth? So that was the first surprise, was realizing that it might be commercializable. At that point, there was hardware and software that was being sold, but the service wasn't available till the following year, in 1989, when 3 commercial services popped up in the US: UUNet, PSINet, and SurfNet. The next big surprise comes when Tim Berners-Lee announces the World Wide Web in December of '91. And at that point, nobody noticed, except for the guys at the National Center for Supercomputer Applications. And they said, oh, this is a nice text-based search engine, but a browser. But what if we made it a graphical interface, a graphical user interface? So they invent the Mosaic browser, and suddenly the internet looks like a magazine. Everybody downloads the Mosaic browser, and suddenly the World Wide Web becomes very visible to a great many people. But it wasn't until that technology was commercialized at Netscape Communications that we started seeing people, for the sheer joy of sharing what they knew, creating web pages, many of them manually, writing their own HTML code, until finally applications were developed to make it much easier to design, build, and deploy a web page. So the early and mid-1990s were a big surprise for me. So much information flowed into what we call the World Wide Web that nobody could find anything, which drove the need for search engines, some of which many of you will remember: Alta Vista, Yahoo, and Google in 1998, and Bing later, all of which we use, many of us, every single day, many times a day. And then the next thing hits, and that's 2007. When the smartphone arrives in the form of the iPhone. And up until that point, Marty's work and the work of the internet had proceeded more or less in parallel. But by creating a device that had a computer, multiple radios, a touch-sensitive screen, a camera, a speaker, and a microphone, the invention collapsed an enormous number of functionalities into a handheld device. And suddenly, the mobile smartphone becomes the way you get to the internet. And the internet the internet gives the smartphone access to literally millions of applications and all the content on the internet. This is a hypergolic, mutually reinforcing environment. So those were the things that really surprised me. And of course, I'm expecting to be surprised again, assuming Marty's vision of the future materializes.
Federico, you go first and I'll finish it.
All right. To me, the surprise was how fast microprocessors were adopted. You know, when I did this work, the first applications that we could see were, of course, calculating machines, because those were obvious, and it was the first microprocessor was designed explicitly for a customer that was making a family of calculators with it. But I saw that control applications were the next batch, because in those days, to control anything would be costly if you have to design a special system, a dedicated system, and you can only sell, 100 or 1,000 of those systems. So the cost of developing the hardware would be prohibitive. And so, that was the first application that Intel went after I showed that, that family could really be effective for control applications. So that was the beginning. But, at that time, also, the technology had begun, the Moore's law had begun to be understood, especially in terms of what do we need to do to drive the curve, so to speak, and so by reducing the size of transistors, in a sort of almost a predictable way, we were able for the next 40 years to double the number of transistors and double the speed almost, regularly, to the point where we had transistors that you could have a microprocessor that would run with 2, 3, 4 gigahertz, which, if you had asked me, I thought it was not possible, because at that time, the size of the transistor would have to be so small that I didn't think we could have been able to do it. But in fact, using special lithography equipment that was blew my mind really when I saw them. We could go down to a micron and keep on going to the point where today we have chips that have 1 trillion transistors. Those are the flash memory technology chips that we use routinely. We don't even pay attention to. But those chips are made by making of the order of 100 layers of transistors, one on top of each other. So it's an unbelievable technology, but we tend not to pay attention to that because we simply use the technology. But again, would I have imagined that we could do that in 50 years ago? Absolutely not. To me, the personal computer that became also an instant success in some ways, and created the background where millions of people could have access to a computer, were foundational, because that allowed them to do all these services, allow internet to become a real market as opposed to a curiosity. So it was the baseline of personal computers that allowed then internet to become very effective, and it became a virtuous cycle. More computers, more better chips, more computer, more applications. And to me, the internet, not as a technology, because that was very clear that that it could be done and all that, but as the new applications that nobody had thought about, search engines, being able to bet on, betting games. I mean, you name it, or I forgot now the name of the company because they come and go. But basically, applications that I would have never imagined were really, happening every month, something new. So for me, this technology has had many surprises, and finally, in the artificial intelligence, back in 1986. Company Synaptics, where I wanted to make chips that learn by themselves using floating gate transistors and being able to use neural networks. I was able to show that worked, but the amount of computation necessary was just not there in those days. But that technology was the technology that now we find applied everywhere, with chips that make trillions of multiplications per second. And that technology also came out of the same basic movement that we have seen. And as I look ahead, I see applications that go way beyond what the technology that we have, but that the technology that we have will allow to develop the technology of the future. For example, the fact that we have transistors that switch using power that is much, much more than the brain uses. It uses about 1 million less watt per switching. And so that, that is an incredible, is a proof of principle that we need to learn from. Today, the chips for AI, some chips dissipate 400 watts. So that's crazy. I mean, how can you use chips of that, for 400 watts? We are back to where we started with computers that, that dissipated kilowatts. But life is showing us, biology is showing us ways of doing it that have quantum computers to actually do the simulation and learn how life really works. And that we may return to that.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Federico. Martin.
Well, first of all, I appreciate being the last speaker in this question, because then I can explain what all the previous speakers meant to say. But we knew back in 1973 that the cell phone was going to be a popular device. The story we told was that someday when you were born, you would be assigned a phone number. If you didn't answer the phone, you had died. And we had no idea that you could put a digital camera inside a cell phone, because the digital camera had been invented. The internet hadn't been invented before. The processor did not exist. So how could you do all this stuff that we're doing today? So all of those things are a big surprise. But the big surprises are yet to come. I think that the cell phone today is terribly suboptimal. I mean, just think about it. You want to talk to somebody, you hold the phone up to your ear in this awkward position. You have what we call applications. There are 4 million applications available to you. Now, how do you pick the one that you're going to use? So the cell phone of the future is going to be very different from the one we have today, and we're going to have all kinds of surprises. Certainly, there will be an artificial intelligence. The cell phone is going to be an extension of your personality, and not some guy at Apple or Samsung who decides what your cell phone is going to be. This artificial intelligence will analyze your behavior and find the right apps to make your life better, or perhaps it will create the apps by itself. But the whole principle of the future of cellular telephony is improving humanity, improving the human experience. We are doing a lot of very interesting things in the Internet of Things. I don't object to working on the Internet of Things, but we haven't yet finished the Internet of People, and I hope that we work very hard at that. And Adam, if you're listening to me, I know you are. I hope you take that personally. But
Okay.
I think we had some wonderful experience to be had in the future of cellular telephony.
Great, thanks. I see a lot of questions in the chat. Please keep them coming. I see a question by Dennis. I want to rephrase it with Dennis' permission a little bit. Vint, your hand is...
Yes, I wanted to respond to Marty for just a second, because the power of the internet is indeed the people who use it. The same argument can be made for the mobile phone and all the computers that people like Federico have developed. The problem that we have, of course, is that not everybody has everyone else's best interests at heart. And so we're seeing these powerful tools being used in a variety of ways, some of which are in fact quite harmful. There's, of course, this huge conversation going on right now about artificial intelligence and machine learning and various applications that arise from it, and the potential hazards that the use of these large language models might pose. And so the real problem we have right now, in addition to any technological challenges, is figuring out how to hold accountable bad behavior, how to do that on an international scale, while at the same time preserving all of the value that we have seen already realized with the systems that we have today, as primitive as they might seem to be looking from the 50 years in the future. So we need sociologists and psychologists and anthropologists and people who are concerned about legal structures. We need people who deal with people and understand, how it is that we accept certain behavioral norms in exchange for certain benefits. That's the social contract that Rousseau talked about many years ago. So the challenges here are not only with the technologists, they're also with people who help shape the way societies work. And we need to help as technologists to reinforce tools that will allow those solutions to be implemented. But we are not the sole parties that can solve all the problems. We have a much broader agenda and a much broader need for smart sociological steps that need to be taken at the UN and the International Telecommunications Union and elsewhere. We're seeing all of these debates going on, which are aimed at trying to cope with some of those challenges.
Great. Thanks, man. So the question coming from Dennis is, what are the biggest technology and societal challenges? And I guess Vint already alluded to it. So I want to make it more specific. For example, for Federico, you mentioned the Moore's law is ending, right? So what is going to be coming after that? What is next? Are we prepared for it? What is going to be the challenges we're going to have to solve in the chip technology in the next 10 years? Vint, you mentioned dealing with the bad players and ensuring that the security of the internet is preserved. What are your thoughts on digital divide and making sure the internet is accessible to everyone? And then for Marty, I know you worked a lot on spectrum management and cellular system as well, right? And as we have more and more of these devices, billion of IoT devices and cell phones, we know that the spectrum below 6 gigahertz is getting more and more crowded, right? And of course, we're not optimizing the spectrum as much as we can, right? Do you think by optimizing the spectrum and do a better job in a spectrum management, the problem is going to be solved, or do we need to explore higher bands, millimeter wave, mid-band, even sub-terahertz? So these are three specific questions, but the underlying theme is what are the main challenges to be solved in the next 10 years in each of the innovations. So Federico, if you want to take the first shot.
All right. Well, obviously there is not much room left with the current technology in reducing the size of transistors. We think that it would be almost impossible to get to 1 nanometer, that's 10 atoms, because when you say 10 atoms, that a line wide 10 atoms, but plus or minus 1 atom, well, it's kind of tough to do. So we're already at 3, and so we need to become smarter in the way we use the technology. We need to be more creative. In the past, we had brute force the entire system, the entire process by, if we can quickly reduce the size by a factor of 2, then we have 4 times the power. And so that strategy no longer works. So we have to become clever. But there is going to be an end to that game, and the appetite for computational power, especially for to use low power, is enormous. Because, as I mentioned earlier, many of the applications that we are talking about today, gobble up gazillions of multiplications per second, and so where do we go? Now, there is the promise on one end of quantum computation, where you have entangled quantum bits as opposed to classical bits that are the exploited to do computation, which allows you to do parallel computation, which can be, many orders of magnitude faster than what we can do with classical computers. But quantum computers have 2 problems. One is that they have to work at near absolute zero temperature, minus 273 centigrade. So that's a tough thing to do. And of course, you cannot have one of those in your pocket. And so they can be a service through the web, through some cloud computing service for people that want to use this type of computers. And the other problem is that they are not general purpose. There are only a handful of algorithms now that can use the power of quantum computation, and so there is a lot of work to do. But I think work is fundamental because it's going to teach what is quantum physics saying. Nobody understands quantum physics today, and nobody understands why quantum objects are entangled. I mean, scientists have been fighting over this for 80 years, and finally they had to concede that there is this non-local property of reality, which is called entanglement. No time to explain what it is, but the point is that we have something here which is so revolutionary and something that actually explains why life is actually not a classical phenomenon, is a quantum and classical phenomenon. And this is an area where I've been working for many, many years, and is an area that promised to explain who we are. Who are we? Are we machines driven by the principle of the survival of the fittest? If that is what we believe we are in deep trouble. Because the survival of the fittest means war, and the fact that we are machines means there is no hope. When the machine breaks, we do not exist anymore. So the problem of consciousness, the problem of free will, the fundamental problems that are at the basis, of the inequality that we see in the world, because that inequality is not a technological problem, it's a human problem, it's a problem of the heart. That is the problem that needs to be solved. And that goes beyond technology. And that requires our heart.
Wow.
That was a strong message. Thanks a lot, Federico. Marty, do you want to go next?
Sure. Wow, that was a wonderful comment, Federico. I don't know how we define the heart in technology, but I think we're going to work it out. But there is a myth that spectrum is like beachfront property. You use it up and there isn't any more. And yet the capacity of the spectrum from the time Marconi did his first transmissions, when he transmitted from Newfoundland to the British Isles, there could only be in the entire world maybe 4 or 5 simultaneous conversations, otherwise they would have interfered with each other. I did an analysis of where we are today. It turns out over the first 50 years, we increased the capacity of the radio spectrum by 1 million times. In the next 50 years, we increased it another 1 million times. So we are 1 trillion times more efficient today in using the radio spectrum than we were in Marconi's time. And yet we still have not just barely tapped the techniques for using the spectrum effectively. In fact, we're doing everything possible to make it harder to increase the capacity of the spectrum. And we let in the US, we let the Congress decide how to allocate the spectrum. I can't think of any group less competent to understand radio spectrum than the US Congress. The whole idea of giving somebody exclusive access to a piece of spectrum doesn't make any sense at all, because sharing the spectrum is the way to make the most important way of getting more capacity of the spectrum. And yet today, every element of the spectrum is owned exclusively by somebody. That's just not a practical thing. But there is no doubt in my mind that we can increase the capacity of the radio spectrum over the next 50 years by another 1 million times. And that's a good thing, because we are thinking of new ways of using the collaboration of people to solve all of the big problems in the world. And I hope, Federico, that we technologists can figure out how to understand the human heart and in the process end the very concept of war. What do you think?
Well, Yasaman, if I could just interject quickly here, we do have a number of questions that have been entered through the Q&A, and there's one in particular that I'm looking at that I think is a nice follow-up to what Vint and Marty and Federico were just saying. The question is, does the panel think the U.S. R&D complex is doing what is needed to keep these great innovations coming? Could we be doing better? DARPA, ARPA, academia, corporate research, different today than 50 years ago? Are there other countries or regions that look to be doing R&D better that might be models for us going, for the next big thing? So if you'd like to put that to the panel. And I see Vint raising his hand to respond.
I'll be happy to start an answer anyway. First of all, there are other countries that are advancing in their state-of-the-art of research, China being an obvious one. I believe in the long run, though, that science is widely shareable, and that's our whole theory, is that shared knowledge is what advances our ability in the long run. And so we should take advantage of that. The internet is one tool for sharing that information, and I'm excited to see more and more of that happening. I do think that, by the way, the phrase survival of the fittest, which Federico said meant war, I'd like to suggest a more optimistic interpretation of what that means. It's more like most adaptable, because if you look at the theory of evolution, it's the adaptation that drives evolution. And so what we need as a society is to learn how to adapt to a more positive environment, to pay attention to our problems like global warming, pay attention to smarter use of spectrum, like Marty was saying. Sharing is, you learn to do sharing when you're in kindergarten. We should remember those lessons and apply them to our everyday lives and the challenges that lie ahead. I know we're going to run out of time soon, so I'll stop. Maybe others would like to respond to that question as well.
I respond to this, Vint, because the principle of the survival of the fittest used to be the principle of survival of the strongest. To me, to call it the fittest is the politically correct version of that principle. The fact of the matter is we think that we are machines. Science is telling us today that we are machines. And if we are machines, then we have a problem, because a machine that we build collectively called AI could potentially be better than us, because they are also machines. Are we really machines or are we not? That question has been motivating me the last 35 years of my life to research the nature of consciousness and the nature of free will. And I am actually happy to say that in the last 2 years, we have, together with a top physicist in Italy, which is one of the top 10 in the quantum information, we have come to a theory that actually shows that consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, and as such, and exists in a reality which is vaster than reality, where you have space and time and the matter that we know, that we think is the only thing that exists. So if you start there, all of a sudden, then living systems are quantum and classical systems that connect the consciousness, which is not part of the living system, is actually exist in a reality vaster. Then living systems then connect to the reality of classical information, the matter, the macroscopic matter that we think is a reality described by classical physics. So now we have a different view of who we are. And in that view, the death of the body is not the death we are. And if we start from here, we can actually go way beyond what we have been able to do, because in the past, we have been considering ourselves completely isolated from the others. That's why if I kill somebody, no problem to me. I mean, basically that person is separate from me. But actually in the quantum world is holistic. There are no separable parts. We are all part of a whole, as opposed to be a reductionistic world. So just changing the sense of who we are can change the way we act in the world. Because now if I hurt somebody, I end up hurting myself, because we are all connected. And if I do some good to others, then I do good to myself. So it is this philosophical starting point that has to change, because if we don't start from there, with the root is not sane, and the root is not sane, wars will continue.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know how I followed that, Federico, because my comments are much more trivial than what you're talking about, but I subscribe to everything that you said. But one of the big problems we have in the short-term future is that we are regulated and politicized by people who do not understand technology. We have a patent system that broke a long time ago, and it was supposed to protect the individual inventor, and at the moment it only protects the biggest companies who don't need protection. So somehow or other, we have to figure out how to revise our political system to understand the kinds of things that you were talking about, Federico, and what Vint talks about, so that we can get out of the way of the technologists, put a minimum of guardrails in. There are people talking about, well, we ought to pause artificial intelligence. Well, good luck. The genie's out of the bottle. You're not going to put them back in again. We somehow or other have to get some intelligence into our political system, and I think that's a major challenge.
I want to add one point to Marty and like answer Barry's questions in a different way. I guess the problem in academia, at least, is that the incentives are for you to solve simpler problems, right? So that you can publish more and you have fast turnaround, right, in your projects. And it's, yes, there are fundings available if you want to do a transformative technology that will take decades, but do we have enough of it? I don't think so. And I think that's a problem, definitely, that's going to impact the innovation and innovation culture 50 years from now.
So it's Vint again. Just responding to that, one of the things that I've enjoyed in the course of my career is something called a skunk works. And what that really is an isolated team which is shielded from whatever business issues are arising in order to go and focus on a particular problem and to just stay on that problem. So internet was built, in a sense, in a skunk works. When I was working on MCI Mail, we were isolated from the rest of the company, and they basically said, go make this happen. So I'm a big fan of skunkworks kinds of things, which let people focus on problems and not be sidetracked by, for example, near-term concerns. Now, that sometimes isn't possible. I mean, you have to have sources of funding and support and facilities and everything else in order to make a skunkworks function successfully. There's a very famous skunkworks that was run by Lockheed Martin, for example, that made some of the most advanced aircraft used in intelligence gathering. And it succeeded in part precisely because it was given the resources it needed, and it was told, don't get distracted by anything else, just go figure out how to make this work. Well, maybe we need a kind of sociological skunkworks in order to figure out how to make these technologies work for us, instead of having it go the other way around.
Well, yes, we have just a few minutes left now, and actually,
I have one final question that I really want to ask. We have a lot of events.
I was just going to suggest time for the final question.
Early career scientists, engineers in the room. What is your advice? What is your message for the next generation of inventors?
I have a simple one. If you want to do something big, get help, especially from people who are smarter than you are.
Amen.
Work as a team.
Wonderful. Great. So I enjoyed the discussion a lot. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. I think we need t-shirts saying on it, Spectrum is beachfront property. And the other one, maybe we are all connected, both through quantum and through wireless communication, something like that. So thanks a lot, everyone, for participating. I know Barry has a few final thoughts for us to share with us, so I'll hand it over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Yasaman. I just wanted to, again, as we're closing, if I can have, there we go. Again, as Dennis said at the outset, this was originally to be a members-only event, but we decided to share it more broadly. And I know there may be many people in the audience who have been participating and, say, gaining some insight into what are some of the benefits of becoming a Marconi Society member. So by being a member of the Society, yes, you get access to events like the ones that we just had, that we all just participated in. And emerging from these kinds of events, networking opportunities with the kind of people that you had speaking with us today. We do have a regular magazine, the Marconi Signal, and also a monthly newsletter. And one other announcement I'd like to make, we do have our annual Marconi Society Awards Gala coming up on Friday, October 27th at the Smithsonian National Museum of natural history in Washington, D.C., I'll say that seats at the gala are limited, but if you are interested in attending, please go to the Marconi Society website and you can get additional information on how to attend the event there. So thank you everyone for attending. And you can see the link at the bottom of the page there. And I believe that the link is also now in the chat if you'd like to find out more about becoming a member of the Marconi Society and participating in the various events and getting access to all the benefits of that comes with membership. Thank you, everybody, and look forward to being in contact with you all again.
Thank you.